On December 8, 2021, the Regional Educational Laboratory West, REL West, along with our colleagues at the Region 15 Comprehensive Center and the Arizona Department of Education, offered a training to English learner coordinators across the state to learn about the newly developed guide, Supporting Integrated English Learner Student Instruction, a guide to assess professional learning needs, based on the Works Clearinghouse practice guide, Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary and Middle School. The day-long training offered an opportunity for participants to engage with the templates and tools in the guide and really think about their application in their context. The Arizona Department of Education also wanted to help situate the guide within Arizona's language development approach to think about how it complements that approach and how LEAs could use the guide to strengthen their implementation of the LDA. While the morning really focused on situating it within that context and getting an overview of the recommendations in the guide, the afternoon really focused on working through a scenario and helping participants use that scenario to experience each of the tools and then reflect on how they could use the tool in their own setting.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lori Van Houten. I'm with the Regional Educational Laboratory West, and we are going to start digging into the main event for today. And our main event for today is we're looking at this Supporting Integrated English Learner Student Instruction, a guide to assess professional learning needs. This guide is designed to work with any state and any group of people. It was actually inspired by the work here in Arizona that Stephanie and Melissa just shared with you. Some of you in this room probably provided feedback for us on some of the early models on this. It was designed by the Regional Educational Laboratory West, by the Region 15 Comprehensive Center folks that you know, the John Paul, Molly, and Jen Blitz, and also with ADE Zoelis, and some of you in this room provided feedback. This professional learning guide, as we'll be referring to it, is based on assessing teachers' use of evidence-based recommendations in a Works Clearinghouse practice guide. Specifically, the professional learning guide references the recommendations in the Teaching Academic Content and Literacy to English Learners in Elementary and Middle School. That is the green and blue document there on the left of the screen, and we use that to put together the professional learning guide. Small groups of educators and researchers with extensive experience on the topic of practice guide reviewed the rigorous research to develop a set of evidence-based recommendations to address a particular educational challenge in these Works Clearinghouse practice guides. There are about 20 of the practice guides. The topics range from encouraging girls in math and science to supporting English learner instruction. And we worked with this one particular practice guide in order to work with those recommendations and embed those into our own professional learning guide. These are the 4 recommendations that are featured in that practice guide. So the practice guide is from 2014. There's 4 recommendations, and under each one, there's a set of instructional practices that are identified in the research. And it does not matter which one of the models you're using, which curriculum you're using. These recommendations are not going to be surprising to you. They're things that you've seen before. As you read these, you'll see that each word is really carefully chosen. There's a whole set of instructional practices that go under each one of these recommendations. And in practice guides, there's also examples of the evidence, the examples of practice, and potential roadblocks to implementation and how to address them. So the practice guides in themselves are really helpful, but there's also tools like this professional learning guide that we're sharing that help you translate those recommendations into something that you can actually use in your classrooms. So the 4 recommendations on which our guide is based is to teach a set of academic vocabulary words intensively across several days using a variety of instructional activities. Integrate oral and written language instruction into content area teaching. Provide regular, structured opportunities to develop written language skills. And provide small group instructional intervention to students struggling in areas of literacy and English language development. The researchers and the content experts that met reviewed this evidence behind each of these recommendations, and then developed and decided how much evidence, the strength of the evidence behind each recommendation. And that's all in the practice guide, along with some of the examples of how to use those in classrooms and so on. And this is, again, for elementary and middle school. If you dig into the practice guide, you'll find that they're talking a lot about within content area instruction. So as you're bringing English learners back into the classroom with your content area teachers, these recommendations will be really useful to you. So what is the purpose of this guide? The district and site leaders identify elementary educator professional learning needs based on the confidence and competence in implementing the 4 recommendations in the EL practice guide. That's what it is. What it isn't, it is not for individual teacher evaluation, but it is to identify group professional learning needs by school, by grade level, or content area. The practice guide, the What Works Clearinghouse practice guide with the 4 recommendations, is elementary and middle school. We've focused our professional learning guide on elementary age students and classrooms. The reason we did that was that's where most of your English learners are in classrooms nationally. So it's in those grade levels, and it's supporting integrated English learner student instruction. This morning, we're going to do an overview of this toolkit in the next half hour or so. And then in the afternoon, we're really going to go down into each piece, and we're going to try out some of these tools. We're going to look at, we're going to follow one fictitious school district all the way through the toolkit. So the toolkit materials include an introduction with some scenarios, we call it the front matter, and examples to plan use of the toolkit, a teacher self-reflection tool, a classroom observation tool, and data synthesis and redirection tools and templates to help districts plan professional learning based on teacher needs. It also helps you identify systemic concerns within the issues and barriers, roadblocks that may be keeping teachers from implementing fully these recommendations. So I was noticing in some of the data that Melissa shared earlier that there were things like scheduling, master scheduling, and the amount of time, or maybe there was curriculum that didn't particularly relate well to the needs of the students and putting these recommendations in place. So those kinds of things are also identified in the guide. We've attempted to draft this toolkit to include this comprehensive front matter and instructions so that a user can pick it up, understand its purpose, and use it with relative ease. In the guide on page 5, you will see that there are 3 phases. There's a planning phase that includes 5 steps, the collecting and synthesizing data, and that's the use of the teacher self-reflection tool, and then the classroom observation tool as you get narrower and narrower into your data collection, and then a couple summary sheets to discuss those data and figure out what those mean. And then finally, the 3rd phase, which has only 1 step, which is to figure out what you're going to do about all this. And along the way, we've also got these 4 use cases. There's the Chavez Unified School District that we've made up that follows them through each step. And then there's a set of scenarios, which we'll dig into in a minute, that also show, here's 3 other possible frames for doing this. But right now, I just want to share with you some of the tools and just give you a quick overview of what those are. The primary data gathering tool is this teacher self-reflection. And it's entirely based on those 4 recommendations that we looked at a little earlier. So it's a good idea that not only do you understand what is in the practice guide recommendations and have a look through that What Works Clearinghouse practice guide, but also that as you use this, if you really want to get some accurate data from the self-reflection, that your educators throughout the district are familiar with what these might be. So we've tried to build some of that into, especially the planning parts for this. How are teachers going to know what these recommendations are so they can give you some accurate feedback about their competence and confidence in using them? That's the teacher self-reflection. It provides sections where they provide feedback for each recommendation on their perceived proficiency, their current use of the recommendations, the barriers to use, and that includes some of that systemic stuff you identified and we mentioned earlier, and their preferred supports, types of supports for professional learning. So all of that is in the teacher self-reflection. Then there's the classroom observation tool. So you've done your self-reflection, you've gathered all that data, you've talked about it, what does it tell you, and now you've got some specific questions. So then you do some classroom observations with some targeted classrooms. Maybe you're going to look at particular grade levels, maybe you're going to look at particular schools, maybe you want specific content areas that you want to dig into. And that's what the classroom observation tool helps you do. And then there's those practices and indicators under each recommendation that are reflected as look-fors in the observation tool. And you've got them as teacher indicators, and there's related student indicators. There's a place there to write down what you see. You can just kind of highlight along the way. And the second section in the observation tool provides summary questions to note whether the teacher could serve as a model for other teachers, and it also allows the observer to note in which grade level and content area the teacher could serve as a model. It has space to note whether there are apparent systemic issues, such as need for more time in the schedule, or additional staffing, or instructional materials. I think you could just go check, check, check. This section can be completed either during the observation or after the observation. So those are the two main tools. And then there's a set of templates. There's a planning tool, which is for phase 1, and that includes those first 5 steps in the guide to help you plan what you're doing. There's data templates to summarize what you get from the observation tool and the teacher self-reflection. And then there's discussion prompts. Again, there's a couple things that this guide is not. It is not an evaluation of teachers. And it's not a flow chart that directs you to certain forms of professional learning. If we find this in our data, then it goes to this. And this is where the discussion prompts really come in. Because you could have really similar data in 2 different districts, but end up doing very different types of professional learning. And we've tried to structure these discussion prompts so that you're able to really look at these data and think about what is it that teachers actually need given our original purpose and goals for this work. After the discussion prompts and the data synthesis, there's the planning tool where you actually figure out what you're going to do. There's, again, some questions at the end that have prompts for you to put together what you saw in the self-reflection and what you saw in the classroom observations, what those systemic issues might be, what the professional learning needs might be, and to come up with a plan, an action plan for what you're going to do next. There's some resources in the guide of things that you might be able to use for that, or there's certainly things that AD and OLS are going to be providing for you over time in terms of training and resources. So all of those will be things that you could use in that final step. It is important to follow the steps in this guide, not just, well, great, we'll just go give out the teacher self-reflection and then we'll just sit down and figure out what we're going to do. It's best to go through each of the steps and really start with step 1 and articulate what your purpose is in using this guide. What is it we really need to find out? What are we responding to in our data in order to make this work? And the other thing that I wanted to just acknowledge was what an amazing job all of you are doing. You know, I can see you, I look on the screens and you're digging into this stuff and then you're pulling up stuff from curriculum and you're sharing tools and you're sharing ideas, and you've been doing this remotely for all this time. It just, I am in awe of all of you, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. So congratulations to all of you.
As the training moved into the afternoon, we focused on using a scenario that the participants could engage with to experience what it was like to use each of the tools or templates. We started out by describing each tool or template in depth, talking about its steps, its components, and its application. The Arizona Department of Education made some explicit connections of the tool or template to Arizona's language development approach so that participants could see how it worked within the Arizona context. As they worked through the simulated district scenario, Chavez Unified School District, which is one that's in the guide as a scenario or example, we had filled out tools or templates based on that scenario so that participants could engage with data, fictitious data, but with data to help inform the decisions as they ultimately made a suggestion or a set of suggestions for what Chavez Unified School District could offer for teachers for professional learning to meet their needs. As they engaged in these exercises, they worked in small groups and they also worked independently so that they could engage with each of the tools and reflect on the tools. There was also time after each tool so that participants could reflect on the use of that tool or template in their context and raise questions that they had about the use of the tool. We hope you're able to use this guide in your own context or setting, and we look forward to your thoughts and feedback about its use.